The Black Hole. Miles's favorite pub was a dingy old place called the Black Hole. It was off Marble Street, which used to be Astor Lane until the Astors moved. The pub began as a woodshed that grew into a building, though the shed front remained until most everyone forgot when the pub burnt down and had to be rebuilt. Miles knew the front wasn't the original wood. Others forgot. Even the current pub owner forgot. He was some nephew who inherited the pub and spent his time giving everyone the wrong drinks, or only turned the volume up louder on the telly whenever he was asked to turn it down. He was a knob. But the pub was the pub, and the Black Hole was Miles's favorite pub. It was where he had his first drink of foam off his grandfather's pint when he was a boy, and it was where he had his first drink as a teenager, and it was where he first bought a drink for a girl on his first date. The girl and the date he can't remember, but he remembered he bought her an ale that he had to drink anyway, as she didn't know what to order, and then she didn't like it. Obviously, the most important part was that he remembered it was at the Black Hole, for how could he forget? Miles knew the pub name sounded like a bunghole, but it wasn't. It was around for 20 years before it was finally named after the astronomical Black Hole, when a true one was discovered in 1971. The Black Hole was an infant as far as pubs went, but it was the only one worth going to as far as Miles was concerned. He had 4 pictures of himself from boyhood to manhood on the pub's own walls due to how much time he spent there. When he was more immature, he carved his initials into every table he could get his knife into without anyone noticing. When he was more mature, he added tally marks. He brought 2 wives there. The first pretended to like the pub. The second hated it. The third wife never saw the place, and perhaps that's why Miles was still married. Or so he would joke. Miles was there after every time a child was born to the family, whether he was welcoming a child into the world or not. He had ale with foam on the top when his first wife gave birth. He had ale with foam when his second wife gave him his last son. He had ale with foam whenever he heard some second cousin's child had a child of their own, even though Miles hadn't seen any of his cousins, first, second, or otherwise, since he was 5, and the majority of the family moved away. Miles didn't care. The pub was his place, and he brought all his children there and hoped they would share his memories and joy of it, but they never did. Why does Dad drag us here? I don't know. I hate it. That was the last time Miles brought anyone to the pub. The children were only children then, but even as adults, they made their mockeries of it. Miles tried to buy the pub more than once, and the nephew who still owned it politely refused. Listen, Miles, I'd be more than happy to take your money, said the man, but this place is a glorified hole in the wall. You seem to like it so much, I wouldn't be surprised if you were the reason it lasted this long. It crushed him. But every weekend, one of those nights, Miles would go to the pub. He saw it change and remain the same over the years. He saw the nephew's desperate attempt to drum up new business by adding neon signs and better stereos and larger television screens. None of it worked. It saddened Miles to see the gaudiness of it, but he tolerated it. When the nephew finally sold it, the pub didn't go to Miles, but a new owner altogether. The Black Hole became Dottie's Drawers, which was a horrible name for sewing notions, but the little old lady who finally bought a location for her dream shop didn't seem to mind. Miles mentioned it to her. She laughed and agreed. The pair got to talking, and Miles learned that Dottie used to visit the Black Hole with her father when she was a girl. I knew how it changed, and I wish I kept it a pub, but I couldn't, she said, a little upset to say so. I couldn't remember all the ways it had been when my father was here, and I know nothing of liquor or licenses. It had to be notions. That's what I know. Miles felt sad, but in a different way. His pub was gone, but he found himself going to Dottie's drawers and buying a button or two here and there. He got his wife new sewing shears, though she had no use for them. Miles bought some upholstery and padding, and he refinished the dining room chairs. Then he reupholstered the sofas, and then the sitting room chairs. He built his own armchair out of pallets he found on the street and began to staple leather onto them. Dottie kept photos from the black hole, and they remained on the walls of her shop, which Miles liked. He was pleased to see a teenage Dottie amongst them, where he pointed out his younger self as well. Soon, Dottie had new photos on the wall, and they were of Miles and the new furniture he reupholstered and made after obtaining notions from Dottie's. "I think I prefer the drinking, to be honest," said Miles's third wife when he brought home more buttons for more embellishments on the sofas. Miles was currently threading them through with a curved needle. "You know, I haven't had a drink since the black hole," Miles mused aloud. "Could you start?" his wife asked before she got up and went to another room. Dottie's drawers didn't last long, but they did outlast Dottie. She died in her sleep, and Miles went to her wake and funeral. He made a small pillow, no larger than his hand, and put it in Dottie's casket. It had a button from her shop and pictures he stole. One of Dottie's drawers and one from the black hole. Again, the name sounded worse than intended. When Miles went home that afternoon, he felt lonelier than he had ever known. He tried phoning one of his grown children and then another. He attempted contact with a grandchild, but that resulted in 2 confused conversations and 1 abrupt one. Any friendships he hoped to maintain into his later years withered with distance and time, and ultimately death. Even his third wife felt more estranged with him. She didn't accompany him to Dottie's funeral and only made a face and said, "Who?" when Miles asked. The words Miles felt were caught in his throat and his fingertips. The way the burn of his first strong drink felt, and the way he stabbed his hand when he tried to find the needle in pulling a button through a sofa cushion. Miles would go on to live for another 15 years with these sensations unresolved. When he died, the hospice nurses didn't tell the family what his last words were, as they were horrible, vulgar things that should never be repeated. "There was a black hole in my life, and not even the notions of Dottie's drawers could fill it."